Hey everyone, Rainbows here with another video commentary, this time of a 2v2 between Biyabo and Learnmore, Terran Protoss, against UCSD and Cattleprod, Protoss on Metalopolis. Cattleprod and UCSD have already gone ahead and spawned in the top two positions, and Biyabo and Learnmore are in the bottom. So we're going to see what that looks like. There's a very, very short air distance between each team's bases right here. And if either player was Zerg, that would have allowed them to get a very quick scout, but as it is, they've all got fairly large distances for their SCVs or probes to run all the way up through this area before they can finally go up the ramp at their opponent and see what's going on. It looks like nobody's doing any super early cheese. Cattleprod has a pylon on 8, which actually could lead into a very early gateway, but I don't see that coming up yet. Learnmore and Biyabo in chat right now have determined their opponent's races, probably from the load screen, as there hasn't been any scouting so far in this game. Biyabo's going to go ahead and block his ramp with a supply depot. It does not look like any of the Protoss players are going to try to get any sort of tight building placement so that they can block theirs with a single zealot. As I say that, I'm actually going to take that back immediately. UCSD seems to be building outside of his ramp right here, which means that he's going to be a little bit more exposed to ranged units who aren't going to have that lack of vision shooting up the ramp, so that pylon's going to be relatively vulnerable. Learnmore and Biyabo right now are discussing strategy. Looks like Learnmore is kind of anxious about mass stalk or teleport. These bases are pretty close, but I don't think they're quite close enough for teleport to go across, but the high ground ledge right here is going to be completely nullified with an observer and blink, because those units can just blink straight up. Warp gates also give Protoss a very large amount of mobility on this or other maps in general. It's kind of nice. StarCraft 1, you didn't really have quite so much mobility. You could move things around with shuttles and recall them around with arbiters. Arbiters, I guess, are a bit more common than motherships, or at least so far as I've seen, so that might be an advantage. UCSD does have a scout on Learnmore here. It's a bit late. 19 food for Learnmore. So he does know that Learnmore is doing some sort of build. That Cybercore, again, I'm not the biggest Protoss expert, but that Cybercore does seem to be a little bit late for Learnmore. But he is going to get that up before a second gateway, so he is not going to have a whole lot of early pressure coming on to these other teams, which means that he's going to be turtling down for a bit more of a late game. UCSD, in the meantime, has his Nexus at completely full energy. It does not look like he's been chrono boosting much at all, and his own cybernetic score is coming up. Some photon cannons actually coming in for Cattleprod. It looks like he's just going to turtle in while he's teching, and his cybercore is already up, and he also does have a second gateway. So it does look like he's going to turtle in with a whole bunch of early pressure. Two photon cannons coming up on his ramp, which will make it very hard for any player to push up. Biyabo is churning out Marines of his barracks. And he does have 2 gas, so he is probably going to tech fairly hard, fairly quickly. A Stalker coming out for Learnmore. That early range unit is going to help in any clashes that go on. It does not look like UCSD or Cattleprod have any sort of range at all, so if any sort of confrontation happens right now, that Stalker just being microed around the Zealots is going to be very effective, but it does not look like anybody is moving out of their base. Looks like everybody's just kind of content to sit back. They know more or less what their opponents are doing, and macro a bit of an army. Orbital Command finally coming in for Biyabo. Looks like he went ahead and decided to make sure that he was really safe and really secure before he did that, because there is a much higher possibility of some sort of a large army at your front in a 2v2, just because there's 2 players on the opposing team instead of 1, and 2 players means twice as many units, so Biyabo's going to be a little bit more careful and not get knocked out like that. It does look like Stim is starting immediately, and he has the gas. He's probably going to start. No, never mind, this is an earlier game. Marauder's Concussion Shells is not an upgrade yet, so looks like he's not going to need to start that because he starts the game with it. 3 gateways. The Cattleprod at the blue player at the 9 o'clock position, scanned by Biyabo. Looks like Cattleprod is gearing up for a whole lot of aggression, but he actually hasn't made any combat units, which is weird. He's got all of these gateways, but he literally hasn't used them. It seems like he's actually waiting for them to be turned into warp gates, which is a bit silly, because they are unit-producing structures before that point. Cattleprod is actually going to go ahead and expand. These gateways may just be a bluff, but it looks like Learnmore and Biyabo, or just Learnmore in this case, is moving up to try to put some pressure on UCSD in the top. UCSD has a couple of zealots out, and he's actually got a mortal being chrono boosted out of one of his robotics facilities. He's got two out, but he can't quite afford to use both. And these stalkers are going to do a whole bunch of damage to these zealots right here, because the zealots have no range. Zealots are actually relatively slow compared to stalkers too. So Learnmore is just going to be able to pick apart a lot of these zealots before this immortal finishes. And the immortal has come out, and the immortal is going to do a very large amount of damage to both these armored stalkers and these just kind of squishy zealots. I mean, they're very tanky units, but still, immortals do a whole bunch of damage, and this immortal actually is just going to have to run away because of all of the incoming damage from Learnmore stalkers. Learnmore stalkers do bonus damage against immortals, so as soon as the immortal shields runs out, they do a massive damage. And these last couple of zealots getting taken out for UCSD by Biyabo's reinforcements. Couple of marauders, couple of marines. Looks like this is going to be a much large enough force to wipe out UCSD's robotics facility at the very least. And as I say that, Biyabo and Learnmore are going for the pylons, just kind of to spite me here. Single zealot coming up for UCSD right here. Well, that's just going to get taken down, and the immortal is finally out of that robotics bay, but it's just going to get taken down by the stalkers before anything goes on. Cattleprod is finally producing things out of his 4 gateways, it does appear, and he's got 4 stalkers against Learnmore's 3 stalkers and a single zealot. And it does look like the larger stalker numbers are actually going to be prevalent. In the meantime, Biyabo is doing a very large amount of damage to UCSD's workers, just knocking them out left and right with those marines and those marauders. And it does look like Learnmore stalkers are getting taken down by Cattleprod's superior stalker force. No blink research for any players yet, so there's going to be no mobility advantage right there. Biyabo, in the meantime, is doing a very nice job of taking out UCSD's buildings, these completely undefended buildings. Looks like Cattleprod is going to come up with 3 stalkers to try to defend, but 3 stalkers isn't going to be anywhere near enough. UCSD's next is going down. Looks like Cattleprod is realizing how trivial of a force his 3 stalkers are, and he is going to retreat from that marauder blob. No, I take that back. He is going in. Biyabo is going to notice that, though, and he's going to be able to take out these stalkers very quickly with marauder and marine damage. Looks like UCSD is coming in with his probes. He may be trying in a last-ditch effort to hold this off just with probes alone, but it does not look like that's going to be successful. Learnmore is taking down the pylon that he just managed to finally get up to power his tech structures. He was producing units for about a quarter of a second there, but Learnmore was able to take that pylon down very quickly. Biyabo is still raising more and more tech structures of UCSD, and it does look like UCSD is going to be out of the game. And in a 2v2, if you are not familiar, you can actually share control of your units, and your partner can stay in the game even when he doesn't have any buildings. So there is a chance, especially because he's on 2 bases, that Cattleprod can come back from this. It looks like Cattleprod has his expansion actually not really that well established, whereas Learnmore has his very similarly established. So they're going to be at... Learnmore is actually grabbing his 3rd as we speak, so Cattleprod isn't necessarily in the best position to come back, but it certainly is possible, especially with the increased macro on all of his units. Learnmore is finally taking out the last of UCSD's buildings, and he no longer has any forces, as you can see by that helpful message there. Looks like Learnmore is actually going to take a 4th. Learnmore's taking a 4th. I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4. He was taking his 3rd. I believe I said 4th. I am sorry. Biyabo is warning that perhaps running into Cattleprod's base is a bad idea in chat, and it does look like it is. Cattleprod has a very large number of stalkers backing up these cannons, and these cannons are going to make it hard for any sort of a force to move in. But it does look like Learnmore is getting up a robotics facility somewhere. Right here, actually. And if he does produce any immortals out of that, those are going to be able to take down cannons ridiculously quickly. They do something like 55 damage a shot, and they take very little damage. So that's just gonna wipe out any static defenses that Cattleprod has. Reaper speed being upgraded for Biyabo, it appears. This tech lab, actually. So we might be seeing kind of a harassment build from him. And it seems like we have DTs coming out somewhere. Biyabo just scanned one, probably because he is Terran and he is a baller, and he realizes that Cattleprod has indeed finished a Dark Shrine, but it does look like both players are going to be okay. Learnmore has a robotic facility up, and Biyabo has scan, and if you really